Praise the Lord, everyone. Brother Roop here. Well, we're starting chapter 9. Chapter 8 was awesome. Chapter 9 is awesome too. And you're going to be amazed by it. It's about the conversion of Saul into Paul. Saul was Saul's Hebrew name. And Paul, or Paulus, is the Latin name for Saul. So, when Saul is converted, he changes his identity from Hebrew to Roman. That's something to keep in mind. And what you're saying is something I got written in my Bible. A little something, just a little chapter outline, chapter 9. It says chapter 9 gives 4 important segments of Paul's life. His conversion, which is verse 1 through verse 9. His baptism and calling, that's verse 10 to verse 19. His first preaching, which is verse 19 to 22, and early attacks against his life, verse 23 to verse 31. So, this is the first of 3 accounts, actually, in the book of Acts of Saul's conversion. You find other accounts of his conversion in chapters 22 and 26 of the book of Acts. In Paul's later letters, he acknowledges that he had persecuted the church of God violently and tried to destroy it. He says that in Galatians chapter 1 verse 13 and Philippians chapter 3 verse 6. And they had been extremely zealous for the traditions of his fathers, which means Israel and the Hebrew nation. He says that in Galatians chapter 1 verse 14. And his early days as a Christian were around Damascus, Galatians 1:17. And that he had seen Jesus Christ. 1 Corinthians chapter 9 verse 1 and 15 verse 8. And that he experienced a remarkable vision. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 1. Though there are minor differences in the accounts, there can be no reasonable doubt that Paul encountered the risen Lord near Damascus, and that his character and life were changed forever. The old man, Saul, was shattered, and the new man in Christ, Paulus, or Paul, came into being. Exactly how we should. Saul was a Jew of Tarsus, a city of great culture, exceeded in only maybe Athens and Alexandria in its splendor, and maybe Rome. He could there hardly have escaped the influence of Greek culture, because it was everywhere, especially in Tarsus. Though a Pharisee, it isn't probable that he would study Greek schools. Though a Jew, by virtue of the Greek culture, which he could not escape, he was by choice, family tradition, a Hebrew born of Hebrews. He knew Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, because growing up that part of the world, you just can't really escape it. That's what the 3 languages were. He probably knew some Latin as well. His family had enough wealth and promise to gain for him a privilege of studying under Gamaliel, a great Pharisee in Jerusalem. His sister lived in Jerusalem and eventually had access to the high priest families. We see that in Acts chapter 23. He was a Roman citizen by birth. Probably his father had been honored with his citizenship as a reward for outstanding service of some kind. Like I just said, his Hebrew name was Saul. He changed it to Paulus, or Paul, which is a Latin name. Probably to gain more access to the Roman world. Yeah, as was the custom of Jews, his father taught him a trade, and his trade was tent making. Either his father was a tent maker, or he knew a tent maker who he can pay to teach him a trade. And that was the story of Paul's early life, his life, and he becomes one of the greatest disciples. A lot of people like to call him, the greatest disciple and the greatest church builder. Actually, according to church history, actually Peter started more churches in the East than any of the disciples did. And he certainly preached in bigger of a geographical area than Paul ever did. Paul stayed to a small area in Greece and Turkey, whereas Peter preached throughout Persia, Iraq, and Turkey, and ended up in Rome. But he was no telling he was a great disciple, and he was instrumental in bringing Christianity. He didn't bring it to Europe; it got there before him, but he most certainly made it stronger. And he certainly focused our doctrine correctly. And he was just somebody that the early Christian church couldn't live without. Thank you.